Welcome back, Virgo, or welcome for the first time. Either way, settle in, get comfortable, because what's coming through today has a very specific weight to it. The kind that asks you to be fully present rather than half listening while your mind runs its usual analysis in the background. So, if you can, just for the next few minutes, let the analysis rest. Um, we'll get to the details. We always do with Virgo. But first, just breathe. Something has shifted. Not gradually, not in that slow, almost imperceptible way that most things change. Abruptly, decisively, in the way that only happens when someone has been sitting with something long enough that the sitting becomes unbearable and the only available move is action. Uh, and the action that might have been taken recently, possibly last night, possibly in the last few days, um, involves you, your name, your situation. The question of what happens next between you and someone who has been carrying more about this connection than they've been showing. Now, before your Virgo mind starts running the verification process, before you start asking for evidence, cross referencing this against what you've actually observed, wondering whether this is real or whether you're projecting meaning onto ambiguous data, um, I want you to stay with the feeling for just a moment because Virgo, of all the signs, is most likely to think their way out of something true before they've allowed themselves to feel it. And what might be true right now deserves to be felt first, analyzed second. So let's talk about what possibly happened. And more importantly, let's talk about what it might mean for the version of you that receives whatever comes next. Uh, the energy around this is not casual. That's the first thing worth naming. Casual energy feels light, exploratory, non committal, like someone turning a thought over without any real intention of acting on it. What's coming through around this person, this situation, this conversation that may have happened without you in the room um, doesn't feel casual at all. It feels weighted, considered, like something that was arrived at after significant internal and possibly external deliberation, which tells us something important. It tells us that whatever decision was made, whatever conclusion was reached in that serious conversation about you, it wasn't impulsive, it wasn't reactive, it wasn't the product of a single emotional moment that will evaporate by morning. Uh, it has the texture of something that was built slowly and then finally spoken out loud. And things that are built slowly and then spoken out loud, those tend to hold. Those tend to mean something. Now, let's understand the psychology of what it means when someone has a serious conversation about you in your absence. Because Virgo needs to understand the mechanism, not just the outcome. You need to see how this works internally for the person involved in order to actually trust what it might be pointing at. So let's look at it directly. Uh, when someone reaches the point of having a serious conversation about another person, whether with a friend, a family member, a therapist, or even with themselves in the mirror at 2 a.m. It means the internal processing has hit its limit. It means whatever they've been turning over privately has become too large, too complex, too consequential to continue carrying alone. And the decision to externalize it, to say your name out loud in a conversation that carries real weight, is itself a form of commitment. Because you don't have serious conversations about people you're indifferent to. Indifference is silent. It doesn't require deliberation. It doesn't keep anyone up at night reaching for another person to help them think it through. Serious conversations happen about people who matter. Full stop. And you matter to this person. Uh, whether that's been clearly communicated to you or not. Whether the evidence on the surface has been confusing, inconsistent, or frustratingly ambiguous. The fact that a serious conversation happened, that a decision was reached, suggests a level of investment that doesn't appear out of nowhere. Um, it was there. It has been there. Um, Possibly longer than you've been given clear indication of. Uh, and Virgo, I need you to sit with that without immediately deflecting it. Without the automatic move of finding 17 reasons why it might not mean what it appears to mean. Um, Without the protective instinct of discounting the possibility before it's had a chance to be real. Because that move, the preemptive discount, the protective skepticism applied to your own worth before anyone else gets the chance to question it. That's one of the most Virgo specific ways of staying safe that also quietly keeps the good things at arm's length. You are allowed to let this land. You are allowed to consider the possibility that someone was in a room recently or in a conversation, in a space you weren't present for, saying things about you that would genuinely move you if you could hear them. Not because it's guaranteed, but because the energy suggests it's possible, and possible for someone who tends to close doors before they open them is worth treating with some care. This reflection invites you to consider: when was the last time you allowed yourself to fully receive the idea that someone might be choosing you, not tolerating you, not settling for you, not finding you acceptable given the available options? Uh, Actually, deliberately, consciously choosing you, the specific you with your specific complexity and your specific standards and your specific way of moving through the world. When did you last let that be possible without immediately auditing it? Because what might have been decided in that serious conversation, in that moment of deliberation that happened without you knowing, um, could be exactly that: a choice made consciously after real consideration in your favor. And how you receive that, whether you receive it with openness or with the armor of preemptive doubt, might determine more about what happens next than whatever they decide to do with it. Now let's talk about the big decision itself. Because the energy around this isn't just about feelings being acknowledged internally. Um, it has the quality of something that's about to move externally, of something that's been sitting in the realm of private deliberation and is now preparing to enter the realm of actual behavior, which means you might be approaching a moment possibly sooner than you've been expecting, possibly in a form you haven't quite anticipated, where something changes in how this person shows up in your life. Not in a vague, hard to read way, um, in a way that's legible, that gives you actual information rather than more material for your already overworked analysis system to process. Because the thing about a decision that's been made after serious deliberation, as opposed to a feeling that someone is still in the middle of, is that it tends to produce behavior that's clearer, more consistent, less contradictory, less of the confusing hot and cold energy that has possibly been making it difficult for you to trust what you've been sensing about this connection. And Virgo, you have been sensing something. Uh, don't pretend you haven't. That finely tuned nervous system of yours, the one that picks up on micro expressions and tonal shifts and the specific quality of someone's attention when it lands on you, has been registering data about this person that your conscious mind has been reluctant to fully trust. Because trusting it would mean acting on it, and acting on it would mean risk. And risk for Virgo requires more certainty than feelings alone can provide. But what might be coming, the behavioral shift that could follow this decision, might give you the certainty your system has been waiting for. The concrete, observable, undeniable evidence that what you've been sensing was real and not a story you constructed from wishful thinking. And when that evidence arrives, I want you to be ready to receive it without immediately subjecting it to another round of verification. Not because discernment is wrong, your discernment is one of your greatest assets, but because there's a difference between discernment and the reflexive dismantling of anything good before you've allowed yourself to experience it. Know the difference. And when something arrives that your gut recognizes as real, let your gut speak at least as loudly as your mind. This reflection invites you to consider, what would you do differently in how you receive this person? If you genuinely trusted that the decision made about you was made in your favor, not hoping it was, not carefully remaining open to the possibility, but actually trusting it. What walls would come down? What questions would stop needing to be asked? What version of you shows up when you're not spending half your energy protecting yourself from a disappointment that hasn't happened yet? Uh, because that version, the unguarded one, the one that's present rather than pre-defended, is the version this person might be making a decision toward. And meeting them with armor when they're arriving without it would be possibly the only thing capable of interrupting what might otherwise be a genuinely significant moment. So let's talk about you in this, because a decision being made about you is not the same as a decision being made for you. You are not passive in whatever unfolds next. You are not a recipient of someone else's conclusions with no agency in the outcome. You are an active participant in a dynamic that is shifting, and your participation, your choices, your willingness or unwillingness to meet this moment with openness will shape what this becomes as much as anything they've decided. Uh, and here's what your participation might need to look like specifically, practically, in the Virgo specific way that requires concrete direction rather than vague encouragement. Uh, it might need to look like receiving without auditing. When they reach and the energy suggests they might, your first move doesn't need to be the verification process. Doesn't need to be the careful assessment of whether this reach is genuine, whether the timing is suspicious, whether the warmth is consistent with previous behavior, or represents an anomaly that needs explaining. Your first move can just be receiving. Being present in the moment without immediately extracting yourself from it to analyze it, letting the reach land before you decide what it means. Uh, that sounds simple. Um, for Virgo, it is genuinely one of the harder things because the analytical mind moves faster than the moment most of the time. It's already 3 steps ahead, already processing implications and patterns and consistency scores, and before the moment itself has had a chance to exist fully. And some of the most significant moments of your life might have been slightly missed because you were analyzing them while they were happening. Not this one. Be in this one. Let it be real before you decide whether it is. It might also need to look like honest communication on your end. Because Virgo, in the interest of not appearing too eager, too invested, too anything that might give someone leverage, sometimes communicates significantly less than what's actually present internally. Uh, you hold back. You calibrate your expression of feeling to match what feels safe rather than what feels true. And the result can be that someone who is genuinely trying to read the landscape of your interest, who is making decisions partly based on what signals you're sending, is working with incomplete information, which sometimes produces the very ambiguity you find most frustrating. The hot and cold, the inconsistency, the confusing signals, some of which might have originated with them, and some of which might be a mirror of the incomplete picture they've been working with. Because you've been strategic with your expression in ways that read from the outside as uncertain. If what's coming is a clearer, more consistent version of their interest, meet it with a clearer, more honest version of yours. Not a performance, not an overcorrection that dumps everything you've been holding all at once, but an incremental willingness to let your actual feelings be legible, to give the connection the material it needs to actually build something rather than perpetually reconstructing itself from ambiguity. Because connections built on mutual clarity, even imperfect, even uncertain, even still figuring it out clarity, are sturdier than connections built on two people carefully managing their exposure to each other. And you might be at the moment where the managing can begin to ease, where something more real becomes available if you're willing to show up for it without the full armor on. This reflection invites you to consider, what have you been holding back from this person that, if said clearly, might actually change the texture of this entire dynamic? Not a declaration, not a vulnerability dump, but one honest thing, one piece of your actual interior experience that you've been calibrating out of your communication in the interest of self protection. Um, what would it change if they knew it? Um, and what would it change in you to say it? Because here's the thing about big decisions that change everything, they rarely change everything alone. They change everything in combination with the response they receive. A decision made in someone's favor, met with openness, met with honesty, met with the willingness to be present rather than defended, that combination is what actually produces the shift. Not the decision alone, the decision meeting its match. And you, Virgo, um, with your precision and your depth and your capacity for a quality of presence that most people never experience from another human being, um, you are capable of being exactly the match this moment is looking for. Um, Not by being perfect, not by having the right words ready, but by being real, by showing up as the actual complex, still growing, already extraordinary version of yourself, um, and trusting that that version is what this person has been deliberating toward. Because they didn't have a serious conversation about a curated version of you. They didn't make a big decision about the highlight reel. Um, they were talking about you, the real one, and they decided something. And what they decided might be the beginning of something your life has been making space for longer than you've consciously realized. Um, Let it begin. Not with caution disguised as wisdom, with presence, with honesty, with the specific grounded openness of someone who has done enough internal work to know that receiving love, real, chosen, deliberate love, doesn't require you to be anything other than exactly what you already are. The power is yours. Um, it always has been. Go into whatever comes next with your eyes open and your armor slightly lowered. Not naively, never naively for Virgo, but with enough space between your ribs to let something real get through. Because something real might be on its way. And it would be a particular kind of tragedy to have it arrive and find you so well defended that it couldn't reach you. You've done the hard part already. You've waited. You've maintained your standards. You've refused to collapse into something smaller just to make it easier for someone else to handle you. That cost something. And what might be coming could be the return on that cost, arriving not because you performed patience perfectly, but because you stayed true to yourself long enough for the right thing to find its way to you. Stay true. Um, Receive well, um, And trust, even if just a fraction more than yesterday, that you are worth exactly the kind of serious, deliberate, everything changes decision that might be heading your way right now. Take what resonates, softly release the rest, trust yourself. Virgo, tell me in the comments, have you been sensing a shift recently? Something you couldn't quite name but felt in your body? I want to know what it felt like. Drop it below. And what's the one thing you've been holding back that you think this person deserves to know? Say it here first. Make it real. Take care of yourself, Virgo. The real kind, not the performative version. See you in the next one.